Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So there were two documentaries doing the rounds at the moment that highlight the two biggest victims of gender ideology. The first one examines the effect on women. Filmmaker Vaishnavi Sundar released her film Behind the Looking Glass last month. And this is a documentary about trans widows. Some refer to it as the ignored story of domestic abuse. The other is a 4-part docuseries by Riley Gaines that examines the effect of gender ideology on children. Announcing its debut, Riley said, "Exciting news. My new 4-part docuseries Transfixed is now available on Fox Nation. The series highlights how gender ideology is synonymous with child abuse, the erasure of women, and the removal of parental rights." And Riley referred to minors as the biggest victims of this whole gender ideology cult.
Female athletes are not the biggest victims in this story. It's the children who've had their bodies mutilated.
There's no way to replace the body parts I lost.
I call it the biggest medical fraud of our time.
There are some people who are doing this work who are not qualified.
Like all scandals, this one has many guilty parties.
She looked into my eyes and said, "You're a boy."
Transfixed with Riley Gaines, streaming now on Fox Nation.
So one of the people to appear in Riley's docuseries is Prisha Mosley, a detransitioner who recently became a mother. Despite all of the damage that had been done to her body, by some miracle, she turned her life around, healed as much as possible, and was able to go on to have children. In the special, Gaines spoke to Prisha Mosley, a detransitioner whose female-to-male journey began at 16, just a couple of years ago, though Mosley realised she'd made a huge mistake, and now she's speaking out in hope of preventing other young people from making the same mistake. So Prisha also appeared on Riley's Gain for Girls podcast, where she spoke about the impact of social media and the effect it has on our young people, especially those who are dealing with trauma. Ahead of the Fox Nation premiere, Mosley detailed her experience on the Gains for Girls podcast. She said her decision to transition came in the wake of severe childhood trauma, including SA, that resulted in a miscarriage, and her battle with ED that landed her in the hospital. Mosley had thoughts of unaliving herself and looked to the internet for support. After a series of traumatic events and contact with predatory adults online, I was convinced that I was a boy and that I had a medical condition where my female body didn't match my male brain. And I had to treat that condition in order to not be suicidal, Mosley explained. I was convinced by trans-identifying adult activists online, on social media, particularly Tumblr, that I was actually a boy. This happened while I was on pro-ED websites with a lot of other girls my age. And about half of the people that I was starving alongside were convinced with me that we were boys.
I didn't want to be a man as much as I wanted to interact with the world as what I thought a man was. I thought that to safely engage with men with whom I sometimes wanted to be friends or hang out or speak, I had to be one, and so on and so forth.
It seems like they usually take children who are already dealing with various issues that have been brought on by experiencing some form of trauma. They take that and then they present them with this gender ideology and sell them a lie, telling them that this is going to help them overcome their issues. This is going to take all their problems away. And they convince parents of that too. And the parents, you know, it's almost like they don't feel like they have a choice because they're told that if they don't go along with this, they will lose their child, that their child will do the unthinkable. And when you're presented with that by doctors who are using their authority and their education to lead people down a very dark path, irresponsible doctors telling this to parents and not even informing them of all of the consequences of giving their children these procedures or this medication. They don't have true informed consent and they're going along with this because they don't want to lose their child. They make these assertions without any evidence, without anything to back up what they're saying. But because they're doctors, people are going to believe them. And then they end up with lifelong patients, which in my opinion is the goal all along.
the process for you. You mentioned having a therapist. You mentioned having to have a letter of recommendation. What else was needed for you to initially get prescribed testosterone?
I have so much to say about that, it would blow your mind. So the letter of recommendation for testosterone came from a gender therapist who had a boilerplate letter for me already up on the laptop that I saw when I walked into the room. She was referred to me by the endocrinologist who was seeing me in secret in my nutritionist's office and administering shots to make my period stop. I previously had the police called on me because of freaking out about my eating plan making me gain weight. But this time, an endocrinologist showed up with a shot that would make my period stop. And then to move on to the next step, I needed the letter of recommendation, and I went to the woman who had a boilerplate letter printed out for me, and I paid her a bit under $300, as I recall. And yeah, I took that letter to the endocrinologist very shortly after and started to be injected with massive amounts of testosterone into my muscles.
I'm curious if they ever turned anyone away under these circumstances, if they ever said, you know what, I don't think it's the right course of action. Because what it seems like to me is that they've already made up their minds. As soon as they get kids on this path, that's it. And they've decided, or they've convinced the parents that it's in the best interest of the child. It's absolutely horrific that they're doing this to children, that they're doing this to our young people, to teenagers. It's like they don't want them to be well-adjusted adults who go on to have families, who go on to have children. It's like they don't want that. Prisha didn't go far enough to completely ruin her chances of going on to have children. And now she has a healthy baby boy. They make no provision for the possibility, the mere possibility, that these kids may end up changing their minds. They make no provision for that. These detransitioners said that all it took was a couple of shots. It's very, very disturbing. This is barbaric. This is wrong on every single level. And it doesn't even address the trauma that they faced. On top of that, it doesn't even address it. Instead, it adds to their problems. Before, they were dealing with mental disorders, for example, emotional trauma. But now they're going to have to deal with physical trauma to their bodies. In many cases, trauma that's irreversible for the rest of their lives. So the procedures and medication she was given had various side effects, such as muscle and joint pain, muscular atrophy, and incontinence. Then the very thing we are told will never happen, happened. She changed her mind. She realized she wasn't a man. She didn't want to be a man. She wanted to be who she was, a woman. She even wanted to have children. She was able to go on and have children, but she had a mastectomy. And she pointed out that dealing with an ED, they told her, you're not fat. That is a form of delusion. That is a form of dysmorphia, body dysmorphia. So when it comes to ED, they're happy to tell them the truth. But when it comes to somebody claiming that they're in the wrong body, denying their biological sex, they have nothing to say. They affirm the delusion and tell them that pursuing, transitioning and changing their gender, which is impossible to do, is going to fix their problems.
And my suicidality was used as proof to coerce my parents into the fact that, I hadn't done it soon enough. If we had transitioned me earlier, maybe I wouldn't have attempted when I was younger. But I know that's completely false. I was suicidal and attempting before I ever heard any of the words trans or gender dysphoria or any of it. I just thought that I had found out what was wrong with me, and my doctors agreed instead of, continuing to say that I was delusional, like when I said I was fat, when I was very underweight. And because of my beliefs, my health was taken away.
And what's so sick is that they use this to encourage parents to do it as early as possible. They use it to say the earlier, the better. So they are targeting children. The child is more likely to be passing when they get older if they avoid puberty. Oh, they'll be passing, which really is just a cosmetic factor. All of these procedures are cosmetic. She had a double mastectomy, remember? And you can imagine after giving birth, the implications of that. She said that her milk still tried to come in because despite the mastectomy, there was still some breast tissue remaining. So she's feeling her milk come in and there is no way for her to feed her baby. The good news is that women came together to support Prisha, and she was even given some donor milk, which is perfectly normal, by the way. Some babies, they cannot take formula. If their only option is formula, that baby will starve. So breast milk saves lives. The women donate breast milk all the time, and it's absolutely a wonderful thing. So thankfully, she was given some support, but she still had to deal with that. And no doctor, according to Prisha, ever sat her down and told her that this may happen in the future. You know, if you change your mind, you may still experience your milk coming in, but feel powerless because you're unable to feed your child. No one sat her down and told her that. I believed for a good minute that I was going to magically change sex and transform into a boy, and that my girl body was going to align with my boy brain by turning into a boy body. And I waited. I stayed hopeful, and I held on for that. But eventually, the effects of testosterone, primarily the muscular pain, became too great. I ran out of hope, and I found out it was a lie. False hope is not worth the price. A lot of these kids end up with bone density issues as they get older, and they become more prone to fractures. So she began her detransition. Fortunately, the 26-year-old was able to give life to a healthy baby boy who had been born via C-section because of the long-term complications of Mosley's cross-sex hormone injections. And after the mastectomy, breastfeeding was out of the question. It's so upsetting to me. My son cries for milk I cannot give him because I don't have breasts, Mosley explained. But what I do have is leftover breast tissue that was trapped under the scar tissue that's inside of my chest and could not reach my son. He would scream and cry, and my chest would get these hard, painful rocks in it. But my nipples are decorative. They don't connect to anything. So these pockets of breast tissue that I have that filled up with milk connect to nothing. And it is the worst pain I have experienced in my life. So obviously, I'm not talking about women who have had to have mastectomies, or women who, for whatever reason, choose not to breastfeed, or women who can't breastfeed, who have various complications and are unable to breastfeed. Obviously, I'm not referring to that. This is a young girl who was given a mastectomy that she didn't need. They removed healthy body parts. They removed them for no good reason. The good news is Mosley is not taking this lying down. She is suing these doctors. Trump also mentioned that if he gets re-elected, he is going to make it easy for these young people to hold these doctors accountable. He's going to set things in motion where if they want to pursue legal action, they're able to do that.
Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable.
So Mosley sued multiple doctors and health facilities on 7 counts of fraud, facilitating fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, rising to the level of constructive fraud, civil conspiracy, medical malpractice, negligent infliction of emotional distress, and unfair and deceptive trade practices, all of which are rampant in our healthcare system at the moment. You can't tell me that there's not a financial incentive to create lifelong patients to push these medications, just like in other areas of healthcare. unnecessary interventions they push on people, all to make billions of dollars. And I just want to give you a little example of what this young lady has had to deal with by TRAs in particular. So this is what she posted initially. She said, transition ruins lives, it ruined mine. Transition ruined my health. Transition destroyed my endocrine system. Transition ruined my liver. Transition made me think I was infertile. Transition took away and incinerated my healthy breasts. And transition stole food from my baby. Transition gave me a high risk and very difficult pregnancy. Transition risks the health of my son. Transition ruined my beauty. Transition took away the natural texture of my hair and anything normal about the hair growth on my body. Transition ruined the insulin production and pancreas and took away my ability to control my weight and my body. Transition put me in chronic pain. Transition made me into someone who needs daily medication. Transition keeps me on a medical leash. Transition ruined many of my relationships. Transition ruined my ability to trust medical professionals. Transition made it harder to reach out for medical help. Transition broke my parents' hearts. Transition ruined my sexuality. Transition ruined sex itself. Transition ruined my ability to have normal sexual intimacy. Transition ruined my opportunities. I can't do as much because of the pain and frequent need for help and assistance. Transition made it harder to explain myself and why I look the way I do, and why I'm legally a man with a manly name when interacting with such customer service workers and etc. And rather than having compassion on Prisha concerning what she has been through, even if you don't agree or if your experience has been different, we had a TRA post the following. Call it pretend, but I look more feminine than you ever will again. Someone said, I'm sorry you are dealing with so many health issues in your life, Prisha, but you can't blame all of your life's problems on the fact that you once chose to transition and insisted on that transition path in your interactions with doctors and therapists. This was a 16-year-old. Why are people forgetting that? And people still forget it when it comes to advocating for so-called trans kids now. These are children we're talking about. I was healthy before. My doctors now confirm this is from testosterone and surgery. This isn't a fantasy, like when a man says he's a woman. It's not pretend. And obviously that triggered this person who said what they said. And this is the beautiful response by Savvy. She said, homie, D-trans queer is pregnant. She is with child. She's fixing to bring life into the world, in spite of all the damage that was done to her. Life found a way. Trying to get emotional reading this. You can't get more feminine than that. The best you can do is imitate femininity and hope no one clocks you out loud. You have to put on a costume every day, while all she has to do is wake up and breathe. And Prisha said, this is very sweet, and it really gave me a smile. So this is what detransitioners have to deal with. The compassion that they say that they want for trans kids doesn't apply to detransitioners for some reason. The concerns about young people unaliving themselves, apparently those concerns don't exist when it comes to detransitioners waking up and regretting their decision and knowing that they can't reverse what has been done to them for the most part. The thoughts of unaliving that come along with that, apparently that doesn't exist, so we're supposed to pretend that that doesn't exist. The same energy that they claim to have when it comes to trans kids doesn't apply to detransitioners, simply because their story goes against the narrative, goes against their agenda, goes against their lies and their propaganda, what they're trying to push. So on the Riley Gaines podcast, Prisha had this advice to other young people. She said, if you have an external locus of control, you need to rely on the validation of other people to stay alive, sane and safe. You might do something like lose your mind or feel unsafe or threatened if someone correctly sexes you, because you believe that you need other people to tell you that you're not a girl or you're not a boy constantly. But if you have an internal locus of control, You can say, I am what I am. I know what I am, and I know how to act like that person. Then you won't have to beg the world to call you the proper pronouns.
What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories, and they have a resident assistant. They make really bad decisions.
So 18 to 24-year-olds are so stupid that they can't live without adult supervision, but kids as young as 6 years old are self-aware enough to chemically and surgically castrate themselves. Makes sense.
So Chloe Cole, another detransitioner, she said probably one of the most infuriating questions I've been asked by a trans activist about transitioning as a child would be, why didn't you just say no? Word for word, an exact tactic used to blame minor victims of sex crimes, which unsurprisingly, some of these same activist types have shamed me for my experience of SA and grooming too. Children in general have a difficult time advocating for themselves and assessing risks. Take a child who is socially isolated, traumatized, or otherwise developmentally challenged, and this difficulty increases tenfold. Responsible, mature adults already understand this. Very well said there. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.